Hey, what's up, everyone? It is Seibo with the Silicon Valley, the Spirituality Show. As always, I have a very special guest, and actually, I have two special guests. My first time interviewing two people at once, but I've listened to their music, and they make some of the most beautiful music that I've ever heard. I mentioned to one of them earlier that I typically listen to hip hop music, but as I've had my spiritual awakening, I've become a lot more open to different types of music. And when I started playing their music last night, it really opened me up in a way that I haven't been opened up without like entheogens or plant medicine. So I really see their music as medicine. Please welcome everyone, Dynasty Electric, to our show.
Thank you so much for having
Thank
us.
you. Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone. We're Jenny and Seth of Dynasty Electric. So
Yeah.
great to
So
be here. Thank you, Seibo.
thank you so much for coming. And, could you give our listeners a little bit of background about how you got into making the music that you're making and the type of music that you make? Because I guess I'm not a huge music person in general as far as, like, understanding all the different genres. I know the main genres, and when I look at yours, I just call it, like, healing spiritual music, but I'm sure that, my listeners would like to have a bit more clarity on what type of music you made and why you're making the type of music you make.
Well, actually, we started off as originally an electronic rock group in Brooklyn many years ago, back in 2005. And we were writing music for television and film, and we were playing festivals and concerts and late night parties in Brooklyn. We had our own loft. And so we had this really great loft party scene, and it was very electric. And actually, we kind of slowly transitioned into working with hip hop as well. And we were working with this great producer named Ski Beats who had produced some tracks with Jay-Z back in the day. And he was a really influential producer in our lives. And we made an album with him. And it was a really, he actually had a really spiritual side. And the hip hoppers that we were meeting in New York, there actually is definitely a spiritual undercurrent in hip hop music in general. Maybe not the entire scene, but a lot of folks in hip hop that actually are interested in spirituality and are aware of metaphysics and aware of the kind of the magic of life. And in fact, a lot of the hip hoppers that we know they're expert manifestors. And a lot of times they're just manifesting through their music where they're speaking their truth into reality
Yeah.
through their lyrics. And so that was our early experience through about 2012 was with electronic music and hip hop. And the group's name, we're Dynasty Electric. Our original role was as a late night party band that we would get everyone fired up, dancing, and we would often not even hit the stage until 2 a.m. or it was a completely different incarnation of the group.
Wow.
And we always actually considered that work to be a kind of a form of sound healing because we've always thought that music itself is inherently has a therapeutic quality. And
Mm.
so, for example, when we're in love, when we're in pain, when we're depressed, when we're anxious, all these different states, there's different kinds of music that can help alleviate those conditions. That our favorite song can immediately uh, just change our consciousness into a higher vibration. Uh, and so we felt that our work at the time was a cathartic kind of healing, that people would heal through dancing, celebration, and just this ecstatic release of energy. And so that was where we were at in 2012. At that time, we met a woman named Lisa Murphy that we were also producing records for artists. And so we were hired to produce some recordings for this artist named Lisa Murphy. And the only information we had about her at first was that she was a sound healer. And so we thought, well, we like sound healing. And we were familiar with gongs and crystal bowls at that time. And we thought it was cool. And so when the opportunity came up to produce some records for her, that we were like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I never had done that before of recording those kinds of instruments. And so I just remember we showed up at her house and she does her work in this yurt behind her home. And we didn't know what to expect at all. And I showed up with some microphones and headphones and computers, not knowing what we were going to get into and not knowing that that would completely change the course of our lives because we did the production for the tracks. And then we actually started working with her regularly. And she was the first person that we knew that was pursuing music specifically for healing purposes, not just in this way that I was talking about before, where it has this healing effect, but with the specific intention of healing
Mm.
people. And she was getting results with people with conditions like MS, drug addiction, heart disease, and different conditions which typically the Western medical tradition doesn't exactly even have treatments for necessarily. In the case of MS, for example. But she was having people that were having zero symptoms after going through her workshops and through her listening to her chanting and her energy work and music work. So we were just blown away because we had never met anyone like this before. That she was like a medical doctor, or and on one hand, and a therapist, but she was using music, and she was using music that was it would transport us into these other kind of dimensional realms. So it was like this whole new world opened up for us. And it was right at that point in our career where we had been touring and playing the late night shows and the festivals. We were kind of at the right time. It was the right time for us to transition into another kind of work. And so we just took our background with music and we started exploring this world of sound healing, these other dimensions, crystal bowls and gongs and different frequencies that are employed in this work and the intentions behind that work. And what we discovered at first was how healing it was for ourselves. That
Mm.
just making that music, all the sort of trauma that we had from being road warriors and festivals and Burning Man many times and all this kind of thing that, which was beautiful, but we were, sort of burnt out in a way. And this music was so restorative for us. And so we started our own sound healing practice. And then we moved to Los Angeles in 2015. And we just started practicing in yoga studios and started documenting the music with albums and different performances. And eventually that led us to just becoming, we still play other kinds of music as well, but now we really consider ourselves primarily sound healers.
Mm. Wow. What a cool story. And, one thing that I loved is I would say that the vast majority of hip hop I did listen to was, in my opinion, conscious rappers. So I'm glad that you talked about that there is that. And, when you were talking about how they were like channeling like their truth and stuff, when I see freestyle rappers, I really love channeling in general. I love watching people channel different entities. I practice channeling myself. But when I watch freestyle rappers, I was like, yeah, this is channeling. They're channeling a different realm. And it's just beautiful to watch like the stream of consciousness just come out, come out of them as they are just allowing it to come out. And I know when I'm freestyle rapping or trying to freestyle rap, it's hard for me to tap in because I think of it as a performance versus just the expression of my truth. But there are a couple times when, like, I'm in the car with my daughters and, we're just having fun and I could, like, tap into it. And I'm like, "Wow, that was so awesome to be able to just say all those things without having to think about it," and just trusting myself that, I wouldn't say something, like, stupid or maybe inappropriate in front of my children while I'm freestyle rapping because my vocabulary for rhyming words is not quite as large as actual rapper. So I tend to repeat things and say certain things over and over. But I love the transition because I had no idea that you guys were kind of like in the EDM scene. And I came out of that scene as well. And one of the things that I do remember is even though all the um, uh, drugs that I was taking, I didn't really have intention with it. Like, they were, like, healing me very much, like, I didn't know that dancing was a form of purging. I just felt like I just liked doing it, and it was something that if I didn't take, like, Molly's, like, I just didn't give myself permission to do. So, I absolutely believe, like, raves are, like, very healing for late teenagers, people in their early 20s, or, the people that are exploring consciousness. But then what I really loved was a transition to, I think her name was Murphy, Lori Murphy, and
Lisa
how,
Murphy, yeah.
or Lisa Murphy, and how she was intentionally coming at this from the healing perspective. And I was telling Jenny, oh, by the way, are you guys a couple or just friends or
Yes, yeah, we're a couple.
okay,
We
okay.
actually met in New York City in 2001 originally, and
Okay.
we've been together ever since.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And so, I don't know why I thought to ask. That's what I assumed, but I thought it was good to ask. Um, when you guys made that transition to the healing music, to me, it's like, how cool is that to be creating something with your partner that is not only healing people, but healing yourselves at the same time?
Oh yeah, and back to your point too about freestyle rapping and entering into that flow state. It was literally it's a flow of consciousness, and that with music, I've always found that it's interesting to hear you describe it because whenever I'm in the zone, it's like the thoughts are disappear because the thoughts are usually what gets in the way of the music. And just like you're saying, when you're self-conscious about the freestyle, that's when you maybe will stumble and repeat a rhyme. And it's like when there's like, it's interesting because it's when you hit that state of no thought that's actually when the consciousness just flows. And then what I find is musically, when I hit that state, sometimes what happens is I actually feel like I physically disappear. And sometimes when I open my eyes, I'll be at a performance at a concert hall or a venue. I'll close my eyes and I don't know where I've gone. Uh, and when I open my eyes again, I'm in this public space again. It's such a fascinating feeling because it's literally as if space and time is suspended temporarily and I'm in some other dimension. And then I do end up coming back into it. But hearing you describe your experience with freestyle just reminded me of that.
Yeah, and I'm curious, the two of you, were you always musically inclined, or did music become like a passion later in life?
Well, for me, I always loved music, singing, and dancing from when I was a young child. My earliest memories, I can remember dancing and singing for my parents. But then as a teenager, I met some girls in middle school choir, and we were singing songs by the Beatles. Actually, I was really interested in George Harrison back then, particularly because of his spiritual inclination with music and mantra and transcendental music. And so we ended up forming a group. We were at that time playing cover songs. We added more material later, but we ended up touring when I was a teenager in England and, in the United States as I was, like, 15, 16, and 17, and sometimes playing for thousands of people. So I've always been interested in music and performing, and when I went to New York City, for graduate school, shortly after that, I was playing bass guitar and guitar in different bands in the city when I met Seth. And actually, he didn't mention the first incarnation of Dynasty Electric because he comes from a jazz background primarily. And so he was touring all over Europe playing jazz music. And so the first incarnation and the first tour we did was an experimental jazz version of the band where Seth played saxophone, his best friend was on drums, and I played the electric bass, sometimes with a violin bow,
Oh,
and through
wow.
all these pedals. So that's how we first started playing. And then eventually it was more electro. We had many different members, there were keyboards and other instruments, and then eventually just me and Seth. But we Seth and I have always been sort of the core of the group, but we've explored so many styles with so many different musicians. So really the sound healing, the therapeutic sort of soft, smooth vibration is to me just evolution of
Mm,
musical exploration.
yeah. It's whenever I speak with musicians, I always ask that question because when I was growing up, like Michael Jackson, New Kids on the Block, they were quite popular. And I would see like my sister or my friends, like they would go absolutely crazy. They would be crying. And I'd be like, that's pretty cool, but it's not moving me that way. And then when I went to my first rave and took some MDMA, like I got locked into the music in a way that I just hadn't felt before. And what I started realizing was just like how closed off I was because it wasn't until I started consuming cannabis that I liked eating food too. I always looked at food as just like something that got in the way of me wanting to do whatever I wanted to do. But the first time I got stoned and ate food, I was like, "Oh, this is what everyone's talking about," you know?
Yes.
So, there was a part of me that I started realizing that, I just wasn't, like, very present and connected to my body, but if I took some exogenous molecules, like, it had a way of making me much more connected. And I mean, I think you can see, like, my djembe drum and my handpan over there.
Oh,
I've been
nice.
I've been trying to self-learn because I've sat in some medicine circles where I watched people play these instruments and was just, like, absolutely blown away. And I was telling Jenny a little bit about my spiritual awakening, before you came on, Seth, and part of my spiritual awakening was in my meditations. It constantly told me to look at quantum physics, and despite being Asian, I'm horrible at math and science, and I was like, "Quantum physics? Like, how can I understand this stuff?" But I just trusted that whatever my intuition was telling me to go look at, I would go and study. And so as I started studying quantum physics, the latest models of quantum physics, if that's correct, I believe it's correct, is like everything is just made up of one thing, and they call it a wave, and the wave is a vibration. And then when I just started thinking about like sound healing versus, like, cutting someone open and then taking something out of their body and stitching them up. I'm like, "This makes way more sense to figure out frequencies and vibrations than doing something physical to someone." And I see you guys nodding your head, and yeah, so I'd like to just kinda hear a little bit more about your thoughts about sound healing and things of that nature.
Well, yeah, you're totally right. I think with your analysis that uh, because we're all made of frequency, and it's all really ultimately all connected and all interrelated, and all really a part of a fundamental unity. But since it's all a vibration and frequency, and music is vibration and frequency, like like our physical body is a pure solid, but we're actually these vibrating cells. And when you really look at molecules, like there's actually just space. Like we're primarily composed of space. So music being the harmonious organization of frequency, that therefore it has this amazing ability that actually, when you're listening to music, you're perceiving it through your ears. But as you know from like for example, like an EDM performance, sometimes like the bass will literally shake your entire body. That you'll feel it in your heart, and you'll feel it in your ribs and in your legs. Uh, these are invisible waves that are actually entering into every aspect of your physical, spiritual, and mental being. And so
Wow.
it music has the ability to actually harmonize the physical, the mental, and the spiritual in it's a really unique way because it's not it doesn't require any surgery or anything like this. And I really believe that if we could determine if we could learn more about frequency and more about the frequency of health and the frequency of different discordances and diseases, we probably could almost eliminate surgery almost, I feel, if we could find the right frequencies to, for example, with heart disease, with the correct frequencies of music, there's potentially, I believe, that ability to reverse in conditions. This is what we saw with Lisa Murphy, that she was able to reorganize people on an energetic level. And her theory is actually kind of interesting, that because everything is energy, that it, if you have a discordant thought, what can happen is that it'll become lodged into the physical, and then it'll
Mm.
manifest as a disease. So if you can actually address it at the energetic level before it manifests into the physical level, it's actually very easy to just remove these disturbances. Once they become lodged in the body, then tools like music are actually very effective at clearing away discordant energies inside the body. But if you can clear it even before it even gets to that point, well, it's still just at the level of mind. And music is also effective for that. That we know that when we listen to music, it changes our mood and our emotion. Uh, and then interestingly too, when you mentioned that I believe it was MDMA that helped you open you up to music.
Mhm.
For me, I remember the first time that I experienced cannabis. That when I put on some music, I was able to hear the music in a way I never had experienced before. That all of a sudden, I I always loved music, but all of a sudden I could hear all the details, and I was so present in the moment, which was so abstract, but it was as if I was swimming in the sound. It was an experience still influences me to this day. And then subsequent explorations of psychedelics just further enhance that experience with music of just being able to hear all the subtle frequencies, all the details, and also the even being able to sort of feel the intention of the musician even that all these sort of subtle things start just coming into the field of awareness. So psychedelics have also played an important role in that for me.
The drum and the handpan in the plant medicine ceremonies you've been involved in, they actually play the role of that rooting and grounding, something
Mm.
called rhythmic entrainment, so that you entrain with this very stable, harmonious rhythm. And so even if you're having these, really ethereal, visual or auditory experiences, that, beat and the rhythm, along with, a synchronization of your breath actually provides that grounding and stabilizing mechanism. So you're able to experience some pretty profound things, from more of a peaceful state of being.
Ah, this is so cool. You guys are definitely my peoples. Like I have these types of conversations with I'm a pretty friendly guy, just random people, and most people are like, "Yeah, this is some pretty cool science fiction," and they'll entertain me for a while, but I could kinda see, like, they don't think I'm rooted in anything in reality, so I'm really appreciative of having this conversation and really learning from the 2 of you.
Well, thank you for saying that, but it's really interesting because before we hopped on the podcast, you were mentioning Joe Dispenza, and one of the things I really love about his work, because it coincides a lot with Lisa's work and with many other sound healers and, people that are involved in esoteric, healing modalities, is that he's bringing in all of these super reputable scientists in different areas to record what's going on in these meditation retreats and to track the brain waves and the differences in the blood. And they're taking saliva samples. So they're doing some really intensive research. And the research is showing clearly the scientific evidence for what is happening during these meditation experiences. And so, he's really on the forefront of showing people that the science matches this mysticism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely believe that, and one of my favorite lines from the first Thor movie, I don't know if you remember, but Natalie Portman looks at Thor and says, "Are you from a realm of magic?" And Thor responds, I'm paraphrasing, he says something like, "No, this magic is just something that your scientists haven't discovered yet," you know?
Mm.
And so it was a pretty cool line, and what you said reminded me of that. And, when you were talking about, like, the vibrations will heal you at the root cause, I had a direct experience of that sitting in a medicine circle where, um before I the first time I sat in a medicine circle was actually this past August. Prior to that, I would do psychedelics maybe once or twice a year with my wife, and we have a couple acres, we live out on a farm, so we would just, go out, be with each other in the field, or I'd put on an eye mask and just go deep within myself, and I just thought being in community would be I don't know, I'm going through some crazy stuff, like, I didn't know how comfortable I would be, but I sat in a circle with 2 pages that came from Brazil. They sung songs from 9 PM to 6 AM,
Mm.
and sitting in that, it really made me just so, like, wanting to become a musician myself. Um, there was one point where I was throwing up probably, like, 15 purges, and when I asked what was going or they had asked me about it afterwards, and I was telling them that I somehow intuitively knew that, like, these purges were taking care of my back issues. I've been to, like, chiropractors, body workers. I've been to almost every single modality to heal my back, and after those 15 purges, like, my back felt fine. And so I kinda knew intrinsically or intuitively, like, this purging was, like, releasing that trapped energy. But the interesting thing was what they told me after was the pages were singing a song specifically to like let go of like blocked energy during the time I was purging. And so that was just like another data point for someone at like my level to be like, oh, wait, no, this is like more validation that going down this path isn't some, you know, quest to reconnect with my father who passed away that is not rooted in anything real, just me hoping to reconnect with the spirit to no, the spirit realm is actually more real than this physical realm. And when you access these higher dimensional realities, even if they don't seem familiar to you, they will feel familiar. And it really switched me from being a logical, rational thinker that experienced life through my head to someone that was much more open from a heart perspective to experience this reality through my heart.
Hmm.
That's beautiful. I think that's one of the strengths of psychedelics and ceremonies and rituals is to break down the logical mind and to open up the heart and to open up consciousness to these other dimensional experiences. Um, and I do think also too, like you were saying that there was something that happened when the difference between individual or small scale experimentation just with your wife as opposed to when you were in the group setting. We know from our work in sound baths that we're in an interesting phase right now because we were primarily a live ceremonial act in Los Angeles. So we would perform. We had a weekly ceremony, and then we would perform other ceremonies, just private sound baths for people at their homes or different special events. But we were 100% in person, live, working with small groups or larger groups of people. That always was this beautiful phenomenon that would happen in these sessions that there would be individual healing, but then there would also be this collective feeling. Whatever the group was would also have an experience together. And we, with the pandemic, everything shifted for us, and we have ever since 2020, we've moved into just more of the virtual dimension of just we're now primarily on YouTube, and and even on YouTube, we also do get the feeling of community. But obviously it's not quite the same as being in a room with people. Um, but uh, even the community vibe on virtually is also we found it to be interesting. We do sound baths on Zoom sometimes, which is Zoom at least gives you an approximation of an in-person experience with the different little with the windows and the ability to interact with folks. And that we were pleasantly surprised when we shifted into online work that while we do miss in-person work, that just how effective the online work is, though, that actually people still do have profound transformational experiences, even digitally and virtually. And it music does transcend even the limitations of the technology. And what the real hurdle we've had to jump is that all the instruments sound beautiful in person. And so how do you make, what sounds beautiful and multidimensional in person with these different instruments, how do you make that sound good through somebody's computer speakers and or through a stereo system in this all of a sudden a flat environment? And that's been our challenge. And luckily, our background is in audio production and engineering. So I feel really happy with what we've been able to achieve with that. But it's always a constant work in progress to how to translate the in-person experience into an online experience that is still going to be satisfactory and healing for people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what was coming to me as you were saying that is number one, yes to the online experience. And then number two, you know, does it have to be one or the other? Can it be both?
Oh,
And then number three was I've definitely experienced the power of online connection. I didn't think that people would be able to connect. I lead guided meditations and guided breathwork sessions now. And when I do breath work on my own, I have a certain experience. When I do breath work with an audience, I find myself having to ground myself, or else I'll have a spontaneous out of body experience. So I absolutely know that just being present with each other, and I guess in quantum physics they would call it quantum entanglement. We are all connected regardless of the distance between us. So I absolutely believe that it was your dharmic path to do this online because you do have the audio engineering background to recreate, what a live experience would be like as best as you can. And, one of the things that I was really curious about, I was gonna ask this a little bit later, but I just been so curious is I see you playing the instrument, Seth, but Jenny, when you're singing for an hour, I'm assuming these aren't like scripted songs, you're just letting whatever's coming through come through. So can you describe that process to the people listening? Because when I'm watching you, I'm like, "Oh, she's like a freestyle spiritual singer connecting with source energy," is the way I think about it in my head. But I feel like when I tell that to someone, I don't know if that's the right description, so I'd love for you to talk about your process, how you feel, and, yeah, just more about, like, when you're doing these hour-long songs.
Well, it's definitely a form of channeling for sure. And as you were both mentioning before, when you really do get into that zone, however that occurs, whether it's plant medicine or sound or breath work or something else, you're very much aware of being tuned in. And then you stop needing to think about what the next notes are, what the next melody or phrase is, so that it's just coming through. The challenge in that, which I remember when Seth first introduced me to improvisational music when we first started playing the jazz, at first I was like kind of horrified by it because I'm like, okay, what are we playing tonight? Whatever you want. Oh, but the key is C. And for me, I wanted to know all of the notes and, what exactly I would be doing. And so, really being in that realm of improvisation like 20 years ago, I think really helped to open me up so that when we did dive back into making more traditional songs, there was always this kind of openness with it. Like the album we made with Ski Beats had a lot of vocalizations that sound a little bit like what I'm doing in the channeled sound healing, most recently the light codes. So just, bringing in that element of whatever's coming in, whatever's coming through has a real power if you can dial into that and just flow with what it is. And
Yeah.
then, sometimes you have to, I say sacrifice, but it doesn't even really matter, is like the perfection. In the case of a channeling, sometimes letting go of that 100% perfection can be helpful because there are going to be some different vocal transitions and, I don't know, sometimes I do kind of channel an idea, like, I'll kind of hear it the day before, and then I'll elaborate on it when I'm actually doing the recording, but often it's just I don't have an idea until I sit there and it comes through, but I've always really been inspired by the music and the vibrations that Seth makes. I feel like I could have no ideas in the world, and then the music turns on, and that's like, it's almost like I channel because of the vibrations he's creating. Like, they're not the lyrics when there are lyrics or the melodies, they don't come unless the music's turned on, and that was always the case when I was writing too, like pop songs, and we still do some of that, but I don't hear the lyrics and the melodies until I hear the music.
Wow. Wow, so the set's music is the catalyst to, like, make that connection and for the information to start flowing through.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and the way that we got started with this type of vocal channeling work was actually
Oh, yeah.
it's kind of an interesting story. We were in so we had a mountain cabin outside of LA that in a town called Crestline, and it was at a mile high in elevation. And so and you it had pretty good stargazing there. And I thought that it would be a really interesting experiment to record outside. underneath the stars at night at that high elevation, and that maybe there would be some like interstellar or intergalactic communication going on, that maybe we could channel some energy. And so we set up on the deck underneath the stars. It was a little cold, but we warmed up into it. And then Jenny just started. She did just start channeling all this new music, stuff that she had never done before. And it's true. I was writing music on the keyboard, and I've since my background originally was in jazz. I've always been an improviser. And then, just another side note is that improvisation is really a big part of sound healing, because improvisation is the part that takes you into the present moment. And the
Mm.
present moment is where all the other moments of time are contained. So when things are like actually too written or too composed, you might actually get pulled out of the present moment and into that. Well, that was written in the past. You're playing a melody that's written in the past.
Well, we have a combination of, like preconceiving different like tones and vibrations that can be used to then like DJ into the live vocals or keyboard or crystal bowls or metallophone, flute.
Wow.
But
And
that outdoor channeling, that underneath the stars channeling, that was where it all kind of began, was just being out underneath the stars in nature and letting the music and nature do its magic. And Jennifer all of a sudden just started singing things that I'd never heard her do before.
wow. Wow. So it was just spontaneously happening. And Jennifer, you brought up light codes. What are light codes and why are they important?
Yeah, so that's sort of the latest incarnation of the channeling. Like this basically new information coming in through the form of vocalizations that we really started doing, I would say, in the middle of this year, right? In the middle of this year. And then I have been very interested in AI visuals for the last like year and change. And I found a way to create some AI visuals that has sacred geometry
Wow.
and different patterns of light, but it's not as vivid as most AI that you see. It has a softer quality to it, so it's very sort of meditative and pleasing. And to me, I've always been interested in the intersection of sound and light. I mean, if you Seth always likes to say, if you keep going up the keyboard, eventually the sound becomes light.
Mm.
So that they're interconnected in that way. And so to be able to have this incredible tool of the AI to then conceptualize the visuals of the audio transmission and really combine them, I think has been very powerful for people. It's been our most popular work to date. And I think it's really striking a chord based on the comments and the feedback. It's really striking a powerful chord with people. So now we've done 4 and we plan to do 4 more before the end of the year that will make up an album called Light Codes.
Wow. Okay. So if I understood this correctly, is well, light is just basically higher frequency sound. So instead of just sound codes or sound healing, it's like sound and light healing kind of combined into one video. That is, oh man, I listened to this without looking at the video. I just had my headphones on and closed my eyes. So I will add the visuals after this podcast when I
And
go
that's an
rewatch it.
interesting process that Jennifer's been going through with the AI text to video software, which, as you know, there's like all these new developments and all these new products coming out. And so it's that also reminds me of improvisation, that she'll be experimenting with different combinations of prompting
Prompting
and scripting.
or other visuals and like combining them
And
and
it'll never, even with the exact same script, the AI will never produce the exact same result twice. It'll always do something slightly differently. And so it's really, it does remind me of improvisation in a sense of like, you need to improvise together with the artificial intelligence, with the software, in order to find that magic. And it's actually, it's been quite a fascinating journey there.
well, I always tell people, a lot of people are, have fears around the development and evolution of AI, but like I have a really great relationship with AI. I'm always prompting it to do these like sacred geometries and like beautiful soft colors and like a peaceful spiritually uplifting unfolding. So I feel um part of it is forging a relationship because it really is a collaboration with the AI, but I've figured out how to communicate through this programming to at least create this current body of work called codes, which is this very soft coloring along with a really soothing audio frequency. And just to add, light codes is also this concept of high spirituality. I think it's associated, and I don't know everything about this, but I think it's associated with Christ consciousness, basically compassion and forgiveness and infinite love.
Mm, yeah, yeah. That's the feeling I got from listening to it, and I come from the tech space. Before getting into the cannabis space, I had worked for a bunch of tech companies that were quite successful. And, AI is something that we've been talking about in the space for quite some time. And,
Yeah.
I think when ChatGPT came out, we were all like, whoa, I guess it has arrived. And, I'm around a lot of people that think it's either the best thing for humanity or the worst thing for humanity.
Exactly.
And so I sat and meditated on it, and what I was shown was, well, it's just like any other tool, like you could smoke too much weed and it's not beneficial, or you could use it intentionally and it's beneficial, and AI is no different than that. But what it
Mm.
was showing me was that we're developing technologies to essentially remind us of inherent gifts that we already have. And so,
Mhm.
like, it was
Oh,
showing me,
yeah.
like, social media. Social media is just to show us, like, yeah, we're always connected, but with social media, we could hide some things from each other and kind of present the best form, but it's getting us into the framework of, like, no, we're actually all connected. And so that was, like, social media. Then, it was showing me how, like, blockchain is everyone has access to a single version of truth. So it was showing, like, yeah, we go from, like, social media to blockchain, and then one day we'll all be interconnected where I'll know what Jenny and Seth is experiencing and vice versa, just kind of being connected like that. And then what it was showing me, what AI is for, is 2 things. Number 1, AI is just teaching us, like, yeah, we could tap into, like, the collective consciousness, ask questions, and get answers. Right now, we just type a prompt, and then we go into these large language models, and then it gives us some information back, but that's something that many people already can do without AI. And then the second thing it showed me was that over the past few centuries, we've been a very kind of linear, logical, rational society where um, those with the most knowledge, are the ones with, the power. And so what it was showing me was we developed this tool, AI, so that a lot of like our desire for wanting to understand things at the basic atomic level, or just, information, like I would say maybe the more masculine way of wanting to interact with the world. Let me understand this thing inside and out. And when I can do that, I'll feel like I get it. And so it was showing me that like AI is going to offload some of that for us so that we could start working on our more intuitive, our more insightful, our more creative side, and really allow that portion of us to cultivate again so that we could be complete human beings, not just ones that are in this logical, rational world, or one that is like in this overly like just feeling world, but tap into both sides of us and allow us to become complete human beings. And when we are more whole and complete human beings, then our frequencies and vibrations will naturally rise from doing that, as opposed to telling people this is the right way or the wrong way. And so expansion of consciousness has been something that's been important to me. And I believe consciousness is just vibrations. So when I think about consciousness, music, and now light, I think of them as just one thing on a spectrum. And I love the word that you use, discordant. If we are discordant, then we're going to be feeling not so comfortable. When we are in harmony with the frequencies, then we'll get into that flow state. That's kind of what was coming to me.
Oh, I
Yeah.
always would say when we would start a sound bath ceremony that if we conceive of the human being like a musical instrument, just as a guitar, when you pick up a guitar, if you don't tune it up properly, it won't play music. But when you get When you get the strings to the right pitch, then you can create these beautiful songs. And so with us as human beings, like when we're out of balance, when we're out of tune, we're just uh, that's when we're depressed. We actually literally will feel heavy and we'll feel weighed down by our thoughts and by our bodies. And we all know that feeling of when we are in tune, when our body is healthy, when our mind is clear, when our spirit is soaring, that you actually feel it's almost as if we are weightless. It's almost as if you just feel so much joy and bliss. It's a it's hard to even put into words, but that heaviness is gone, and it's almost as if there's no feeling in the body, no pain, no it, it's a it's almost like an out of body experience, even.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you guys don't mind, I would love to share my spontaneous channeling story with you because I'm very curious about your experience, Jenny. So last June, I was out in the yard and I was just doing some gardening. I took a 100 milligram microdose of psilocybin. And as it was starting to take effect, it had this very familiar signature to it, which was it feels like DMT. I was like, this. So I went inside, um, and my wife was like, "Who are you talking to?" And I was like, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just having a uh, conversation in my head. And she's like, no, you've been talking to yourself for like the last 15 minutes. And she said that I was using three different voices, a really kind of deep baritone, like authoritative voice. There was like kind of like a pixie fairy voice. And then there was like this kind of monotone uh, uh, robot voice. And then there was like my own voice. And so I had no idea that I was vocalizing all of this, and the entities have told her like, "Hey, don't be nervous. There's nothing going on with your husband. Just put your head over his heart chakra and you'll see." And she put her head over my heart, and she immediately got pulled into the same space that I was in, and this went on for 5 hours. Um,
Wow.
I
Wow.
I had, like, access to, like, every single cell in my body. It was actually quite overwhelming where I had to ask the
Yeah.
entities to just give me a break, and the way that I describe it to my wife was, I'm just kinda, like, sitting in, like, a sofa in my brain, and they were kinda sitting in chairs,
Wow.
and, we're having a discussion, and yeah, and it just seemed like we were talking, and then I was physically talking without really knowing I was vocalizing this. So,
Mhm.
I wanted to explain to you kind of like how I experience channeling, and when I'm channeling now, I would say that there is some awareness of what's going on, but it's almost like very dreamlike. When I come out of it, I know like, okay, I said things kind of like in this area, but then it starts leaving me quite quickly unless like I write down or rewatch the video. So I'm curious when you're channeling, like, what is the physiological experience that you're having?
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. What a cool experience. And also on just a microdose, it's we were just talking about y- if we're hosting any retreats that are psilocybin based, that just doing the microdosing with the sound could be so powerful because I think we are accessing deeper and deeper layers of our being. And yeah, at some point you realize like you don't even need any psilocybin. You just start doing that naturally, which I think is what a lot of channels do. So to just uh, add sort of a general comment about channeling, because I also watch a lot of channels. I'm a big fan of Next Level Soul podcast, and he has mediums and channels on there all the time. And so I'm not sure if you've ever heard him speaking to some channels because he always asks each of them, what is your experience? Like, how are you channeling? Just so I know what I'm preparing for when I'm interviewing you. And some of the people, just like you mentioned, are speaking in a different voice and they don't really have much of a recollection of what is being said by the channeled information, whether they're channeling an entity or just something from the Akashic records. They don't actually know what was being said. So that is one form of channeling. Another form is where they are getting the information like that as similar but they know everything that's being said. So the entity or energy from the Akashic, let's just say it's an entity, is conveying the information, and then you as the channel listening and then saying. So that's a second way. The other way, which some channels have come to in their lives, mediums, is that they are always channeling. So some people get to a state where they're always in a state of channeling. So they're always receiving that divine information and then just speaking it. So when you speak with someone like that, it really is just very conversational because the energy is always coming in. And even though they're not thinking logically about what it is they're wanting to say, that cosmic wisdom is always coming in and they're able to communicate it instantly, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And I
So I thought
remember
that was so interesting when, they sort of laid it out like that.
yeah, and what is your experience, your
Yes,
personal
so to
experience?
answer that, I just wanted to sort of add that because you were having that one specific type. I think it could also morph throughout your life into maybe different, but it seems like most of the mediums or channels that I've seen interviewed develop one particular type of channeling and they sort of stay with that. And that, for some people initially, it was more like it is with you. It's just sort of this spontaneous thing that happens and they can't necessarily access it on call. So I think that's like a specific skill that is developed. So
Yeah.
for me, like I mentioned, I'll give an example. The Lionsgate sound bath we recorded recently. So we were sitting in the room over there, pointing this way, which has our bowls, and there's actually a big window that shows us the forest and the ocean and the sky. I remember singing those vocals, and I didn't know what they were before I sang them, vocalizations, and looking out at the window. And sometimes when I connect with nature, like the whole scene gets sort of blurred out. So it was just like everything kind of turned white. And instead of, I guess, being separate from the nature, then it was my realization that I was part of it. And it was
Mm,
clear that it was just flowing through. I'm totally aware when it's coming through, but just more in a heightened state of perception.
yeah, yeah.
And trust, I might add. Trust that whatever note or vocalization is coming next has like a flow and a melodic quality to it.
That's so cool. And, I remember I stumbled upon Next Level Soul when he had a few thousand followers, and
Oh
I
my
think
gosh,
just like a year and a half or 2 years later, I saw how
a
big that
million,
channel's gotten. And I'm
almost
curious,
a
do you have any favorite channels that you like to listen to?
Well, aside from that, I also really love an astrologer from the UK called Pam Gregory is her name.
Mhm.
I think it's just Pam Gregory astrologer you could look up, and she's just has so much wisdom about astrology, but not just that. Her intentions and her her knowledge of the archetypes and her intentions of the information she's conveying is really for an uplifting of humanity. And so I just really love the service that she's providing and the way that it's very down to earth. She just turns on the camera. She's sitting on her couch. There's some pillows in the background. It's really kind of lo fi, actually, but the knowledge and the information she's conveying and her intention to uplift humanity is really poignant. So I
Mm,
really like her
that's cool.
channel a lot.
That's cool. And, one thing I wanted to do was just kinda bring it back to the sound healing because I think that if my hunch is correct, the vast majority of people, they have some idea of what sound healing is. I've seen the bowls, I've seen people singing, but Yeah, if you could describe what exactly is sound healing and, why would you want to hire you guys to come over and do some sound healing?
Interesting. A
A
bird
bird
nearly.
just flew into the window.
It's
I
okay. It just bounced right off.
That's why she's like, "What was?"
I heard it. I heard the little thump, so
It wanted to come and join us. Luckily, it's fine.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
I would say, sound healing really, anytime you talk about music and genres, it's when you really get into it, it actually it's very difficult and abstract to like what is a kind of music? Because there's within like, for example, EDM, if you think about like all the subgenres, there's like I don't even know, like they're always inventing new subgenres even. That there's just countless variations. And so I would say though with sound healing, the fundamentals, it's really about the intention. It's about the intention of both the musician and the recipient.
Mhm.
Because if the musician needs to have a pure intention, that's it's paramount. Musician has to feel in a place mm, uh, of calmness and healing themselves if they're going to invoke that kind of response from their audience. And so, one of the things as sound healers that we seek to do is always to keep our health and our spirits high, and to maintain that equilibrium in our own lives, to make sure that we exercise, eat a healthy diet, and just live that balanced lifestyle that's going to put us into that healthy zone that we'll be able to help others as well. And then from the audience perspective, we've seen this so many times that if somebody goes into a sound healing with an open heart and the intention of being receiving a benefit from it, they're almost certainly going to receive some benefit. Either it's just relaxation, or maybe it's just a nice tranquil feeling, or maybe it's visions. People have visionary experiences frequently. Uh, and for those who go into a sound healing thinking along the lines of music doesn't do anything. This isn't going to change anything. How could this possibly heal me? That they're just playing some bowls. And I would even say in those cases, from my experience, that some of those people will have zero effect and will just maybe just leave. Half of them, though, it's the music will have the mysterious effect and it'll change their opinion about that. That they're like, well, I did think that it had no effect, but then afterwards I felt so kind of like warm and fuzzy and like almost it's almost like a high, but without side effects. It's almost like a psychedelic experience, but without anything. Mm, and like none of these stories that we've been describing about psychedelic experiences would really relate exactly. It would be more just super pure. Like there was no plant medicine involved, or it was just music. So it has this real pureness to it. So even the folks that are skeptical, I find most of them actually end up, even if maybe they don't have the full healing experience that the open person does, that their mind changed a little bit. And just that little opening, well, maybe they're going to come back and try it again. Maybe it helped them to just to tune their nervous system a little bit. And there's so much anxiety and so much tension in this world that I think any of us, like just a little bit of relief from the stress and pressure of the modern world, it's always a welcome time for us. So I really feel like intention is ultimately it, because the instruments are going to vary. I mean, any instrument, a guitar, a voice, a piano, or crystal bowls, a gong, a flute, a hang drum, a djembe, all these instruments could potentially be healing. It's really comes down to the intention.
Well, it speaks to the popularity about plant medicine because, and you spoke about it earlier, it really is these blocks and these barriers that plant medicine is super effective. Like if you have skepticism, I would say have some plant medicine and you probably won't be too skeptical after. So in that sense, it's not the answer to everything. You do have to integrate, you do have to um develop your own practice aside from just plant medicine ceremonies. However, if you are super resistant, skeptical, blocked, or you have some barriers to your own healing or to your faith about vibrational healing, sound healing, anything else, then that can really help clear that and open up um your being so that you can receive the benefit from any of these modalities.
Yeah, and am I okay, so I know you guys do online events, you guys used to do in-person events.
We'll
are
be in
your
LA in, January through, like, the spring, I would say, and we'll be offering some live, ceremonies then.
We'll be
oh, very
primarily in the LA area, but we also would like to travel throughout California. So perhaps there's even a chance we'll make it up to the Sacramento area as well.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Where are you guys located now?
Well, right now it's actually we're on this kind of an interesting project. So we're opening up a sound healing retreat center in Canada, in Nova Scotia. So we actually have 4 acres on the ocean, and there's two houses, and we're going to be building a performance center where that'll be where the sound baths will take place. That'll be right next to the ocean, and then there'll be
Oh,
lodging and
wow.
accommodations for everybody here at the property, and then we'll have like a sauna, and there'll be cold plunging in the ocean, and just all these little amenities. And so we acquired the property about a year. It's been about 2 years now, and so it's a multi-year project that we've embarked on. But now we're just sort of turning the corner where the the project here is kind of coming to fruition, and we started holding events this year. We're gonna hold some more events next year, and that actually does free us up to come back to California, which is we kind of we're originally from the East Coast, and Jennifer's family is originally from Nova Scotia, so we feel a connection here. But we also just sort of feel like California is our spiritual home. That just vibrationally, we really relate to just the culture, and we're looking forward to getting back.
Uh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Well, if you're ever in this area, please let me know. I want to do as much as I can to amplify your message. And, one of the things, this is totally tangential, but I remember, Seth, you were talking about physical objects just being these like vibrating atoms. And if you look at the atoms themselves, it's more or less just empty space. Then when you said, if you keep playing the keys on a note high enough, those notes start turning into light. And maybe you guys saw this video. This video has been making the rounds, but it's a 5-minute video called The Discovery. And so the discovery, the guy posits that if you take a 650 nanometer laser and you diffract it, so you make a line like on your wall of like 3 or 4 inches with the red laser, and you smoke DMT and you look at the laser line, everyone will see the same source code for physical reality, just like in the Matrix. And so when I think about being able to bend reality, I think of like the music that you guys making as like, okay, there's not like probably it's not like some programmer programming this code, but if everything is energy, then to me, a way to manipulate that code would be through like making like the music that you guys make that can heal someone or give them more energy or allow them to release some trauma that they've been holding on to versus, just thinking about like reading like Carl Jung or, psychological books that will maybe intellectually help you understand what you should be doing, but then just having that negative energy still trapped in your body.
Yeah, it's the coded information that allows you to transcend and break free, and that's essentially what you experienced with your back pain. Like, just receiving that information that helped you to finally clear that.
Yeah.
It's like light is information, sound is information, and those vibrations can interpenetrate and, harmonize and, align us in a health that helps bring us to that healthy equilibrium. So, yeah, maybe it really is just this coded information. Sounds like you have a thought on
Well,
that.
I completely agree that it is coded information, and it just the story that comes to my mind is when I was a DJ in New York City many years ago, I would play clubs, and I what I just remember is in terms of the transformation of physical reality through this coded information that I would sometimes I'd get a club, I'd walk into the room, there'd be nobody there, and I just have to start playing records. And but what I the amazing thing about it was with that information, if I had that intention of bringing that joy and that bliss into my DJ set, it was always inevitable. All of a sudden, this dead room, people I don't even know sometimes where they would come from. People will hear the music, they hear that coded information. All of a sudden, this room, which was just a dead space, It would be full of people dancing, having a great time, and the music just would transform it. My DJ set, maybe I'd DJ for an hour or two and then I'd end. And then literally as soon as I pull the plug on the music, unless there was another DJ coming up, all that energy would just disappear again. That the
Wow.
people would stop dancing, people would go off, do their own thing again. I always found that so fascinating how the music would literally just transform a space. And DJs see this all the time that with their work that it really is this coded information that in that case, it's this code of like, it's the code for celebration and joy and dancing. And so people get that information, they get that psychic message. Oh, now it's time to like, break out the dance moves, hit the dance floor and have some fun with some friends. I never, it's just that kind of basic everyday magic that we kind of take for granted. But we see it all the time, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to me, it sounds like your intention combined with the music, really drew the people in. And my nephews and nieces always like to use the term "your vibe attracts your tribe," and I really love it because when I think about like the people selling crystals at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk that are telling you to keep your vibe high, I was like, wow, they're actually using the right vernacular. I know it was just a hippie term, but yeah, in terms of vibration, it's the right nomenclature. And, one of the things that I've realized about intentional living is I like to say it's unpredictably reliable. When you put your intention into something, you might not see the effects of it like come to you immediately, but at some point you will. And so I've just really trusted that if I bring in the right intention and energy, it doesn't matter what happens immediately, but I know from a trajectory point of view, I'm going to continue to expand and to be more compassionate. And what I wanted to open up for the two of you is, I've asked a lot of questions here. What is top of mind for the two of you that you would love to communicate out to the world?
Well, right now we have the intention of just creating a more peaceful and harmonious world through our work, and it's our belief that since we are all connected, that as each one of us transforms ourselves, that inevitably the result will be a shift in the three-dimensional reality as well. And so, even though we see all this tension and discordance in the world these days, uh, that the work is still happening on the individual level, and maybe we don't always see or hear things or feel things immediately, but kind of like you're saying, with the intention that it will yield the results in the end. That sometimes it might be slightly different than what you initially had envisioned, but there's still, if you trust, it will be a beautiful result. And so that's really with our work that's our intention is even if it's just a small contribution to global harmony, global peace, and just increasing beauty and healing in this world. That's our goal.
Mm. What about you, Jenny?
I feel one of the most important things right now is a unification because there's so much divisiveness and polarity. And one of the things I've really appreciated about the light codes is all the comments that people are sharing. It's everything from people who are aligning with like the Pleiadian star system, but then there's also like a lot of Christians
Mm,
and just people of all different backgrounds from all different places sort of converging on like, oh yeah, this vibration, uh, it feels like home. It feels like peace. It's helping me to relax and heal, and I'm just loving that it's all of these different backgrounds and human experiences, and that it's somehow converging, at least to our small extent here on our YouTube channel, of all of these people from everywhere, because unification, moving towards a more unified society where we see each other as that divine spark of a human being, and we all have that in common.
I love that word unitive. I was actually using a version of that this morning when I was talking to two different parents that were having a spirited debate about politics.
Mm.
And, what I just left them with was like, look, like you could support or not support whatever you want, but just kind of take a look at your actions, take a look at the person you're supporting. Is the way they're conducting themselves a way that is bringing people together, or is it using fear and divisiveness to drive a wedge?
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that. And so they
Yeah.
kind of thought about that. And, you know, I really appreciated that message because Seth, you had just talked about, you know, a way to bring more harmony into the world is to kind of bring that harmony to yourself first, you know,
Mm.
versus telling someone else like this is what's right and this is what's wrong. And the last woman that I interviewed left off with something very similar. She said, "The world will always have war, discontent, polarization, lack of self-acceptance, as long as we have that within ourselves."
Mm.
And that really resonated with me to the core because as someone that came from San Francisco, I had very progressive beliefs. As someone that lives in a conservative town, what I've come to see is humans are humans. There's cool conservatives, there's not cool conservatives, there's cool progressives, there's not cool progressives, but always just try to see people as a human, be compassionate to them. And what I found is when I lead with that, I could always find some sort of middle ground where
Oh.
we don't have to necessarily agree, but we see each other as humans. And if we continue to see each other as humans and we don't dehumanize each other, then, you know, I think the name calling, we got to get rid of these people or we got to suppress these people will go away because we see each other as another human that is worthy of love, respect, and acknowledgement. And I kind of want to leave off with a lighter question is Seth, seeing Jenny channel, do you channel or does that make you want to channel too?
Oh, it's interesting.
It's a long story.
Well,
Actually, not a short story, but
well,
yeah.
no, I can keep it brief, but uh, my work is just not vocal channeling, but that all the music is. I don't. I wouldn't say I know where it comes from. That's just my. That's how. That's my form of channeling was with
Oh,
the.
so when
But
you're
you're in
doing you're improvising as well. I did not know that. Okay. Well, you are a jazz musician. Okay, so I'm tying it all in together now.
Well, and then well, there's. I'll share one quick story because this was how I got. This was the start of my career. That I was a philosophy student in university, and I loved music, but I wasn't a musician because I had this conception that, oh well, in order to be a musician, I needed to be a virtuoso, and I needed to have started studying when I was a small child, and to be a prodigy, and I had all these concepts in my mind about what a musician was or was supposed to be. I uh, I was studying philosophy, and I was also playing saxophone and guitar, but as hobbies. And there was a really strong music program at my university. Uh, it was Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. And so Anthony Braxton, who is a jazz saxophonist, was on the faculty there. And he's just an amazing musician, world class, hundreds of albums, MacArthur Genius Grant Award. Like he's a really amazing musician. And so I was taking his class and I was actually struggling a lot with it. It was very technical musically. It was way over my head. But I don't know why exactly. He saw me after class one day in the hall and he said, excuse me, sir, would you care to join me tomorrow afternoon for an improvisation at 3 p.m.? I almost was like, I, I was like, yes. I was like, okay. I was so nervous. You're a master musician. I was a complete amateur, 19 years old. I had very little experience. I didn't know what I was doing. I went in the next day at 3 p.m., pulled out the saxophone. He said, gentlemen, it was me, Anthony Braxton, and another musician named Richard McGee. He said, gentlemen, I'll see you on the other side. And so that was all the instruction. There was no sheet music. There was no other conversation. Just, I'll see you on the other side. We started playing, and it was my first out of body experience. It was my first telepathic experience. It was a religious experience for me. It changed my
Wow.
life completely. I started playing things on the saxophone channeling. I had never practiced. I didn't know that music was inside of me. I had no idea that it was even me playing. It was an out of body
Wow.
experience. I was no longer sure if it was me, Anthony Braxton, or Richard McGee who was playing these notes. And the music was just otherworldly. I couldn't even believe that I was playing it. I couldn't believe I was part of
Wow.
it.
And it ended at the
And
same
then
time.
it ended, and
At the same
I
time.
had a message that said, "Oh, it's about to end." And we all hit a note together, a chord together, and then it just ended and a silence hung in the air. Anthony Braxton looks down at me and he says, "What is your name, sir?" I was like, "Oh, I'm Seth." It's like, "You wait right here, Seth. I'll be right back. And we're going to do this again." We played again and it was the same, another amazing experience. He sees
Wow.
me a couple days later on campus. I was walking on the street. He pulls down the window to his car. He was driving by. He goes, "Excuse me, sir. Would you like to do that again on Friday evening at Crowell Concert Hall as part of my concert series?" So all of a sudden I
Wow.
go from, I'm just jamming with him in private, then at the concert hall, and then he hires me to join his band, and we played it all over Europe, and it was the beginning of my professional music career, and it was all through channeling that, I just didn't even know that I knew how to play that music. Sometimes when you, entrain with a master, though, I think it can work like this for spiritual and meditation work too. That's why there's gurus and teachers. And sometimes when you entrain to a master or a guru,
Mhm.
you'll have a quantum leap in your development that you don't even understand. Like all of a sudden, the guru just said one word or had one intention for you, and all of a sudden, like, oh, everything just opens up. And that's in my. He really, even though he wouldn't consider himself a spiritual guru, Anthony Braxton, I've always thought of him as that in my life. That he's been like a mystical guru for me. So,
Yeah. Well, that entrainment makes sense when I'm with my friend's uncle who was teaching me to channel. It's much easier for me to get into the channeling state when I'm with him. And man, what your story kind of reminded me of was kind of like demystifying like what channeling is. Like I know when I'm doing jujitsu, I hit the channeling state. When runners have the runner's high, it's a channeling state. We talked about freestyling, improvisational music. And so one of the things that when I was meditating and trying to learn more about channeling, they're like, Seibo, you're channeling Seibo right now. You don't need to overthink it. It's just about kind of like switching the station. So I really love that last story that you shared. And for the audience that are curious to find you or want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
well, we're at dynastyelectric.com, and that's electric spelled with a K instead of a C at the end. And our YouTube channel, which would just be youtube.com slash dynasty electric.
Oh, well, Seth, Jenny, this has been such a beautiful conversation. The last time I looked at the counter, it was at 10 minutes, and I was like, good, I got 50 minutes. And now that I looked again, I realized we're like 15 minutes over the hour. So this has been I feel like we got into the flow state for sure during this uh, podcast. And I just really like I said, your music isn't like normally what's on my playlist, but when I heard it, I this is all I listened to last night, and it's actually what I fell asleep to, and I feel great today. So if you guys are curious about Dynasty Electric, I would go check them out right now. I will put their direct links in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. We really appreciate being on your show. And thank you to all the listeners as well.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. We'll be back next week with another show. Thank you so much to Dynasty Electric.